Hey, shout out to Footballer's Diary.
Hey, shout out Footballer's Diary.
Greatest asset is
LAFC. Footballer's Diary. We are here with not only a U.S. legend, but at this point, a worldwide known name, Cory Gibbs. Man, thank you so much for being here.
Tony, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. Well, we just like to, we like to start with the beginning to kind of hear where you're from, where you grew up playing. So if you could take us back to the beginning, man. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up playing?
Dang, that's years ago. I gotta date back. You making me think about this one, but nah, it's a good question, man. I grew up playing in Hollywood, Florida. My parents are Jamaican, so when they came over here, I was born in the States. I started playing probably around 5, 6 years old in Hollywood, playing for the Wildcats. And
Okay.
that's where it all started, really. I was I played multiple sports, basketball, baseball, football, and obviously soccer. And to be honest with you, my passion was baseball, you know?
Really?
Yeah, that was my thing, man. I was always fast, and I was always able to get on base and do my
Good
thing.
build for baseball too. Like
What's that?
good build for baseball too. Like you fit
Yeah,
that
I
profile.
appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it, and that's what really captivated me. But it's so funny. One day I saw myself in the sports section on the front of the sports section in the Sun Sentinel. I think I was like 8, 9 years old, and I was like, all right,
Wow.
maybe I'm pretty good at this thing, man.
Maybe I should take this seriously.
Yeah, literally. I was just like, you really don't know as a kid, right? You're just
Right.
having fun and going out there. When you hear the parents say, "Oh my gosh, Corey scores again," you're like, "All right, whatever." You just move on to the next. But in all honesty, I saw myself in the Sun Sentinel sports section on the main page, which I still have that newspaper, crazy enough. And
Wow.
yeah, I kept it. I kept it ever since, and that really inspired me just to tick on and keep doing this thing. So I played for the Hollywood Wildcats for about 4 or 5 seasons, and then moved over to Plantation Eagles,
Okay.
where I played all of my youth soccer, and also played for Nova High School, and then that's when it all kicked off for me.
Man, that's crazy. So, I mean, South Florida is such like a melting pot, and we've had so many either Caribbean or Caribbean descent players that
Mhm.
have come from Broward and Miami. What's it like coming from like a soccer culture that we have here in like South Florida that might be different than the rest of the states?
Yeah, it is different, man. It motivates you, it pushes you, it gives you that drive because you're playing with the Latin community, the Black community, the Caribbean community, and even the American community. And it's like you said, it's like a melting pot, right? We seem to be, especially at the youth level in South Florida, just more technically sound, right? And
Yeah.
what I learned at a young age, more so than what I would probably say anywhere else in the country, was the mentality was different. My mom always pushed me in terms of, yeah, you did good, but you could do better, right? Yeah, you did great, but you can always do better than what you just did today. Yeah, you scored 2 goals, but why didn't you score four? You know what I mean? So that culture was really installed in us, with the parents screaming on the sideline,
Yeah.
let's go, and singing songs and chanting. It almost felt like I was playing like a grown man, like in a European stadium. So I
Yeah.
carried that mentality over from a young age, then transition it from not only college, but then to the professional level.
Man, that's cool. That's like a real Caribbean mom. I've experienced that. So I heard a story about I think it was Uruguay. Like there's this neighborhood that like Suarez and a few other like big players have come from. And they said we know we're gonna break like 90% of our players. Like we're gonna break them as children, but the other 10% are gonna be really good.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's like South Florida. Like the 10% that come out of South Florida are gonna be really good.
yeah.
So I think it's like a cool parallel.
No,
Which
it's true though. I mean, going to that point, there were times when it was tough, man. I'm gonna be real with you. Like I'd train, and I'd come home from training, and my mom especially was just on me, right? Like she would literally tell me, "Don't let me go out of, don't go on that pitch and embarrass me." And I'm like, "Embarrass you?" And there were times that you wanted to quit, but She was really the driving force that just kept me going and pushing me and just really installing that mental aspect of my game to the next level. And I think, I don't want to fast forward to where we are today in football, but it's good to bring up the point where I think we're lacking that mental drive in youth football today, right? Which was different from the culture back then where
Hmm.
I grew up.
Yeah, man. You mentioned your mom. Did you come from like a soccer family, like a family that like had a soccer background?
Yeah, my older brother Omar, he played and I really idolized his game. Like he was a goalkeeper, but I really, he was a really, really good player and he also played for the Eagles and for the Jamaican national team. And I was always able to train with like his team and the older boys.
It's
And
crazy.
my dad also played, not at a pro level, but he played at a high school level and a club level in Jamaica. And my mom was always the one that she never really played, but she was always that person on the side that really pushed us and keep us engaged and, always brought us to the next levels. Like, she always found a way, right? If I couldn't afford or we couldn't afford like a tournament, whether it's in Cocoa Beach or back in the day, Dallas Cup, which is a big
Yeah.
showcase, we found a way, bro. She found a way to make it happen. You know what I mean? So she was really instrumental in that drive in terms of what made me really platform to the next level.
That's really cool, man. So growing up in South Florida, especially around that time, a lot of people have kind of forgotten about Copa Latina,
Mm.
and it kind of was like a mini World Cup here. Did you have any experiences with going to watch Copa Latina or even the Strikers or growing up?
A good question. Not Copa Latina, but definitely watching the Strikers. Back then, even the Miami Fusion, you remember
Mm-hmm.
them? And I
Yep.
really admired that team because a lot of my friends were actually, well, I shouldn't say friends, but a lot of my brother's teammates, Tyrone Marshall, who's still involved
Okay.
right now with Cincinnati, being a coach,
Yeah.
Jeff Cassar, who I knew very well. A lot of these guys, especially from the South Florida area, I used to train with these guys because they were older and they played on my brother's team, right? So I used to watch the Miami Fusion train a lot. And then before I went to college, and even when I came back on my holidays from college, I was training with the Miami Fusion. It was almost surreal to me. You know what I mean? So those were really the tournaments and the teams that I really idolized when I was growing up playing.
That's really cool actually because it's like your brother, not only expanded your network, but kind of gave you like those pro tendencies early,
Yeah.
kind of molded you like that from an early age.
Yeah, and not only from football, just life experiences, right? Like the older brother, you see him driving his car, and now you want a
Yeah.
car, right? You see him
Right.
wearing different clothes, you want to wear his clothes, right? So he not only, you know, he not only gave me direction or inspiration from a football standpoint, it's just life experiences, and I give him a lot of respect just in terms of the growth and development that I had for sure.
Man, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to ask you about, and it's obviously before your time, but being that you have an older brother, he might have uh, heard about this and kind of felt this too. And anytime
Hmm.
I talk to a player from the 2000s, late 90s, they still said they felt this. There was like a Miami rumor that like the players from the 80s kind of ruined it on the college scene for a lot of players from South Florida because, back then, especially like Duke, NC State, like these were very like still old school colleges.
Hmm.
And the players that were coming in from Miami were bringing that Miami party with them.
Yeah.
And so the rumor is that college scenes start telling the scouts and hey, we these Miami guys like hey, we gotta slow down and bring them in. And kind of long story short, we went from like dozens of players every year going D1 to very few in those late 90s,
Yeah.
early 2000s. Obviously you went to a school that was, when you're academically sound, the rest of your life usually is. So it might not have been your experience, but did you hear about that or feel that growing up and playing soccer in South
It's
Florida?
funny, man. I'm gonna be real with you. I never heard of that, right? But it's funny that you say that because when I was actually looking at colleges and universities, now thinking about it, like the UVA's didn't recruit me, right? They came at me because I started high school 1 year early, so a lot of these colleges didn't even know I was a senior at the time, so they were hitting me 1 year already at Brown University where I ended up saying, "Oh, they want
Wow.
to recruit me." I was like, "Bro, I'm already in school." So
Wow.
when I was coming out of high school, Obviously, Brown University was recruiting me. Notre Dame, that was big back in the day. That was probably one of the bigger schools that recruited me. And then there were a lot of state schools, right? Like Florida state schools, like USF, UCF, FIU, and then one or two others around the country. But now that you say it, the Dukes of the world, UNCs of the world, UVAs of the world, they weren't recruiting me, but that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, there was just so many players from the late 90s, early 2000s said, man, if you went to any of those schools, you had to have like extra vetting. Like
Mm,
it was like really hard for them. So
mm,
this is an interesting, kind of interesting thing that kind of happened. But a lot of them say that that kind of lasted a long time and turned into this like, issue that a lot of South Florida players had.
Interesting, man.
But getting into Brown, man, you that really is it's an interesting school for interesting path, I should say. And Footballers Diary, we cover a lot of D1 soccer. I think it's probably the best it's ever been right now.
Mm.
What was that experience like, man? How was it going into Brown?
Bro, I'm gonna be honest with you. When they were recruiting me, I didn't even know where Brown University was. Like, no clue. Like, I'm from South Florida, and I'm like, Brown, like where? I didn't even know. Honestly, I didn't even know it was Ivy League. Like,
Right.
Ivy League to me or to us back then was like Harvard, right? And
Hmm.
like Princeton. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Princeton. You think of this, but like the Dartmouths of the world, Browns of the world, even Columbia, who was recruiting me late, I didn't even know they were Ivy League schools. But I'm gonna be real with you. Like the college coach at the time, Michael Noonan, who's the head coach for Clemson University right now, he was so instrumental in the process. He was flying down every week, every two
It's so
weeks,
good.
coming to my house, meeting with me, putting that pressure on, meeting with
Really?
my mom, yeah, and really force the envelope, right? Like for me, I wanted to go to like a state school, right? I went to USF, and I'm there with
Have a good
Jeff
time?
Cunningham. I'm like, yo,
Yeah.
this is where I want to be. It's like a party place. But he really installed values to not only me and my mom. And my mom was like, bro, you're going to Brown University, right? And it was a struggle, bro. Like at the time, SAT scores were very big. My high school GPA was only like a 3.4, 3.5, and that's a low standard for an Ivy League school. And I was like, all right, well, I can't get into Brown, so I guess I'm going to USF.
Sorry.
And my mom kept saying, no, you're taking the SAT again. I took it 5 times. I took it
Wow.
5. She was forcing the envelope. She's like, you're going. So after the fifth time, I did well enough to get in, and the rest was history. My experience couldn't have been any better. I was fighting it for the first 6 months, like, yo, I don't want to be here. Transfer me, transfer me. And they stuck with me, which I give them a lot of respect for. And I really learned to just adapt, right? That was the hardest thing for me. I'm with these high profile students and professors, and the school has this magnitude of just excellence that I wasn't used to. But I adapted and I acted like I belonged, right? And then I felt
Right.
acclimated, and soccer was amazing. We had 3,000 fans at games, which is unheard of for a soccer community, especially at Brown. And the college coach at the time, Michael Noonan, who's almost like a second father to me today, he was so instrumental in my growth as a person, as a player, that I have zero regrets, right? And the educational aspect of it was so instrumental in terms of my growth and development as a person that I owe the school so much respect to where I am today and who I am today. And what I love about Brown, it's a liberal school,
Hmm.
right? So they don't force you to do, certain classes that maybe you're not really comfortable with or you might not have an interest in. It's very liberal in creating a curriculum for you, right? That interests you. So that helped make my pathway in terms of the academic standpoint a lot more easier for me, but more interesting, more so than anything else. I took the econs of the world, which I love, and the maths, and this was my thing, right?
Yeah.
Economical structure, not only in America but around the country, and why certain countries are developed or underdeveloped the way they are. Um, and I think that played a huge role in my success on the pitch, right? Because those pressures academically weren't on me as much. That made me play a lot more free in my development as a soccer player. So my experiences at Brown they were amazing. Like I almost miss those days, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
And you had such a good like collegiate career. It's like you really made the most out of that.
Mm,
Um, I seen the numbers like last year, and it was showing that the players that were coming out of college had the long had versus MLS and USL homegrowns had the longer careers,
mm,
like by a lot actually.
Yeah.
Do you think it's what you just explained that it kind of prepares those players more? They have more time to develop. What is it? Why do you think college has, from what the numbers show, been such a good path?
College for me, and I tell a lot of kids this, like today, a lot of players, young kids, right? They just want to sign pro ASAP, right? At 14, 15
Hmm.
years old. But college prepares, students to be people, right? And growing them as human beings and just being more structured from life standpoint, just maturing, right? And you're
Hmm.
living on your own and you're able to be more developed in these ways. And then when they become pro, life in general becomes a lot easier and it gives you more structure and responsibility, not only on the pitch but off the pitch. So I see the parallels in that when they're going from college to then being a pro.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So from college, you get drafted and you decide to go to Europe. How I mean, I'm sure, especially like man, what a jump, bro. How did that?
Yeah, it was like unheard of back in the day.
Yeah,
I graduated in 2000, 2001, and doing something like that was unheard of. But again, Michael Noonan, who was my college coach, was really instrumental in the process. And timing's everything too. I remember playing against Duke University at our fields at Brown, and I had a great game. This is when Ollie Curtis was playing for Duke, and he was like the superstar for them. And Steve Sampson, who was our U.S. coach, was at the game. Ironically enough, I think he was in Boston at the time. He decided to come over and watch Ali
check it
play.
out.
And while watching Ali play, he was like, "Oh, who's this Brown University kid at center back?" Right? And it was just uphill from there. He watched me play. I was still young. I was probably 18, 17, 18. He was like, "Listen, you're not ready to be on the men's national team right now. At this time it was Eddie Pope, Tony Sana, Greg Berhalter, but I definitely think you can make that leap from not the U20s but the U23 team with the Olympic team." And I was like, "Oh, wow." So my first camp was like with the U23s with the Olympic team.
Wow.
Yeah, and I did really, really well there. I then ended up going with the U20s to their World Cup, which was in Nigeria. And while at the World Cup, FC St. Pauli in the Bundesliga saw me playing, and the rest was history. They were like, "Listen, we think you would be a good addition to our club." They were in the second league at the time.
Right.
When they were recruiting me, they were in the second league. They got promoted to the Bundesliga, and they were like, "We still want to take a chance on you. We think that you'll be a good second team player for us." And I said, "Listen, I'll take my chances. This is something I want to do." I was in between signing with them and the Miami Fusion. Ray
Hmm.
Hudson was a coach with the Miami Fusion back then. A lot of people don't notice. And I literally trained for 4 days with like Tyrone Marshall and Jeff Cassar and all.
Hmm.
Like Miami was stacked at the time.
Yeah.
Pablo Mastrioni, and the league came to me and they were like, "Oh, we want to sign you to a deal for like 26, 30 grand a year." And I was all for it. I was like, "Yo, I could live back home and make 30 grand." I'm laughing.
Good. Yeah.
And my mom was like, "You're not, like, Corey, that's not money. Like, you're not
Yeah.
getting that." And to be honest with you, my first contract at St. Pauli wasn't big either, but the opportunity was there, right? And she was like, "Listen, if the league's not willing to do a better deal for you, I think you should take your chances, move to Germany, and take a risk on yourself." Hence the reason college matured me to then be able to live on my own to the point that I spoke about earlier, right?
Right.
Having those life experiences at Brown were great because I was mature enough to be a man and live on my own and live in a foreign country that's very difficult to live in, right? Racism was real back then in Germany,
Yeah.
right? Everything closes at 8 p.m., right? It's cold, right? And you're a foreigner. You don't speak the language. The language barrier is real. But listen, I went over there with an objective, and the task was difficult. They saw me as a second team player. I was able to come into an environment where it was a brand new team because they had to reconstruct for the Bundesliga, and I outperformed their expectations. And they were like, "Listen, you're not a second team player. We see you on the first team in the Bundesliga." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Everything changed.
It was everything. My life changed, right? The first 3 games of the season, I'll never forget. I wasn't even in the roster. And I was so hungry at this point. I was like, "Yo, I don't see myself as a second team player." As you guys said, I'm going to work every day tirelessly until I get rostered. And after the third game of the season, the team wasn't performing well. I literally started every game after that for the first team. And yeah, the rest was history. And I just had to do my part on the pitch and stay mentally focused.
Man, that's a great so going, man, I see why you credit your mom so much, right? Because
Yeah.
every step of the way got you there. It was like
Yeah.
single moments that got you where you are right now.
Yeah, no, she installed that mental drive for me. Like you have defeated the odds all your life, right? She was a single mom since I was like 9 years old. It was difficult growing up with my brother, and she had to raise both of us. Then I'm going to Brown University where all these high prolific people, and I'm just like, yo, like I don't feel welcomed. I felt out of place. You know what I mean? And she's like, you're gonna defeat those odds. Keep fighting, keep pushing, keep developing. Like just stay on track. And my next challenge was now I'm going to be in Germany in a foreign country playing at the highest level in the Bundesliga with all these world stars at Bayern Munich and Bayern Leverkusen. And she's like, yo, it's fine. You know, you mentally have the capacity to defeat those odds. You have nothing to lose. You know what I'm saying? So she's always installed that confidence in me, that mental drive in me, right? And always to stay grounded, like, yeah, you did good. Okay, you started your first game with a team, but that's nothing. You got
Yeah.
33 more games to go. You know what I
Right.
mean? And anything less than a start is not acceptable. Anything less than a 7 out of 10 on Foot Mob or whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
the app was back then, is not acceptable. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So, yeah,
Were you the first American at St. Pauli?
I was the first. I think Eric Ronaldo might have been there before me.
Almost.
I think
Right.
he played,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
or he was in Germany at the time. But I think Eric Ronaldo was there than me, and then Ian Joy was there after me. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then even it's the that South Florida connection. Even someone and a good friend of mine, Fafa Pico,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
yeah
yes.
after
Yeah,
that.
Fafa was there. Yeah, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. And Fafa's a good friend of mine too. So yeah, he played for them as well.
So you kind of like, there's a lot of Americans that kind of open the door in Germany, man, and it's been such a friendly, maybe friendly is not the best word, but a somewhat friendly league to Americans, and now it's like, a really good proving ground
Mhm.
for Americans. But I would be not doing our fans any favor if I didn't ask about your time with the U.S. national team, and you played with some great players. What was that like, man, being part of such a special U.S. national team?
That was surreal, and I give a lot of credit, where credit's due to Bruce Arena, who was the coach at the time. He said, "Listen, you're a young player. I've been watching you. You've been doing some good things, and I want to give you your chance and your opportunity." And that was my next challenge. And I remember going into my first camp, and I'm like, dang, I'm gonna be playing with these young top players, and they're younger than me, but they've really created a name for themselves, like Landon Donovan,
Hmm.
and DeMarcus Beasley, and Eddie Pope, who was my idol. Like I had Eddie Pope's poster on my college dorm, right? Now I'm like in the locker room with this guy.
That's crazy.
It was nerve-wracking at first, but again, I was just like, yo, I know I can compete, right? That was the start of it. I know my abilities, and I know I can make a name for myself. And Bruce gave me my opportunity to do that, right? He believed in me and literally made me a starter on that team when available. So, and DeMarcus Beasley, who's a good friend of mine, helped me feel most comfortable in the environment too. So, I remember my first camp was in Virginia, and right away they, Bees was like, yo, like we should be roommates, and we roomed for that first camp, and we were roommates ever since. You know what I mean? They just made me feel welcomed, and it was surreal at first because we were such a good team with Claudio Reyna and John
Yeah.
O'Brien and all these world stars, and Brian McBride, who was a legend. But I felt like I belonged from the first camp on.
Man, that's crazy. That's crazy. And that group, like people are really surprised, like this year especially, right? The US, well not excuse me, the MLS has sold a lot of players this year. You see leagues. Anytime you sell a player, the other leagues are respecting you. They're
Yeah.
buying your players. And this year, particularly, you see so many players that are getting sold and getting big money elsewhere. But it was really your group, like that group of U.S. national team players, and a lot of those guys who decided to come back from Europe to play in the MLS that kind of set up the U.S. team for what it is today and the MLS for what it is today. What's it like kind of being part of the group that kind of sparked that and kind of seeing it grow from what it was to what it is now?
I listen, I love the fact that we were instrumental in creating the pathway. Um,
Yeah.
you know, you have some players back in the day that hold a grudge, like, oh, we created a pathway, now look how much these kids are making and where they are. I don't feel like that. Like, I feel honored to know that the world really respected who we were and believed in us as Americans that we are also just as good as soccer
Hmm.
players as the rest of the world. And now these kids are getting opportunities. So I feel humbled by it, to say the least.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to to kind of see. Um, Going to the youth side of things, being you're someone who actually was a U.S. product. You did your youth here. You went there, made a name for yourself, came back.
Mhm.
What have you seen over those years on the youth side today?
Today, like when
Yeah, from now to today, have you seen improvements? You think we're headed in the right
oh,
direction?
we're heading clearly in the right direction. I think youth development has grown exponentially from when I was playing. When I was playing, we didn't have MLS academies, right? You
Right,
just figure it out. You're playing for a club. Like we have random club coaches, and the talent and really came from us on the pitch and holding ourselves accountable. We didn't have
right,
direction or organization or these type of showcases that youth soccer has today. I think, MLS has done a great job creating these academies and creating platforms, not just to be sold, young players here to be sold in Europe, but for them to develop here domestically, right?
right.
And then playing in this league where they're getting that exposure to play with world stars like Messi and others, and their development has just been, you know, developed just drastically. We're looking at 14, 15, 16-year-old phenoms right now,
Yeah,
whether it's Julian Hall from New York Red Bull, Kevin
amazing,
Sullivan from
amazing.
Philadelphia Union, where Man City and Chelsea, and most recently like Barcelona are catching the attention of these players. Where back then, when I was playing in the youth system, which is club soccer, we're just hoping to get a college scholarship. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's grown exponentially, and I give the league a lot of credit for developing these academies and the platform for these kids to grow at a younger age.
And just overall, like for the U.S. landscape, I'm somebody who actually likes the U.S. landscape. I think it's I know there's problems with everything, anywhere, right? Like there's going to be something you don't like about it. But for me, I like MLS, USL, college. I like our pathways. I like the U.S. system. I enjoy college soccer. But there are obviously are people who see issues with it. Are you someone who likes the pathways that we have, or do you think there's room for change?
No, I think it's trending well in a sense where I'm a huge believer that, people nowadays think, oh, college soccer, collegiate soccer is not good for the so-called pros, upcoming pros. And I'm totally against that theory. I think it creates an avenue because not everybody's going to be a pro at 16, 17 years old, right? And we've seen multiple players, like you mentioned earlier, in terms of multiple players going to college and then becoming pro players. And, I represent a couple of those guys, right? You look at Omer Fernandez, who's at Colorado right now. He went to school first.
Yeah.
Brandon Cervania went to school first, and others. So I think it's very competitive from the mental aspect of the game. It helps them develop a lot more, and I'm not against it at all.
Did you know early on that you wanted to be an agent? Like, was that something that was in the back of your mind?
Never. Never in my wildest dreams. And if you ask me today, would I change being an agent for something else? I'll tell you never as well. For me, it was such a grimy world for my
Mhm.
experiences, not with my personal agent or agency. Wasserman represented me my whole career. Richard Motzkin, the president of our group, represented me personally my whole career. And that was outstanding and great. And ethically, they were just different from everyone else. But seeing and hearing the stories from other agents or agencies, it was just horrific. There were players that I used to play with in Europe that didn't even know the last name of their agent or the name of their agencies, and it was so backwards to me how the agent or agencies weren't working in the best interest of the players, that I didn't
Wow.
want to belong to that dark world, right? But when I retired, I tapped into other areas in the soccer world, like being a TV analysis and color commentary, and I was doing scouting for a little bit, and then Richard Motzkin approached me and said, "Listen, I think you'd be a pretty good agent." And I said, "Listen, if I'm even going to entertain this, I want to have my own twist to it, and it has to be in the best interest of the kids. I want to be breaking down film. I want to be grassroots. I want to be a part of their lives. I don't want to just be their agent. I want to be their mentor. I want to be their advisor. I want to help their families." And that's the route that I took. And that's what I think made me very unique from the others. And I won't bash any other agent or agency because our world is very difficult. But what I would say is that's a different approach that I took on board when I first started that a lot of agents or agencies weren't doing. So I thoroughly enjoy it. I love being a part of the kids' lives, whether it's, ups or downs, like everything in
Yeah.
life. But living vicariously through them has brought me a lot of joy.
That's an amazing response, man, because you do see like people promise a lot more than they could offer, and it's
Mm,
important to be there for the downs just as much as the ups.
yeah.
Uh, and I can kind of see like like you're talking about your college coach, your mom, like kind of put you in that type of mindset to kind of give that back. But speaking of the youth, if there was something you were going to recommend or tell them, meaning the youth, what would that be to help them get to where they want to go?
Just follow your dreams, man. Follow your dreams and don't rush the process. Don't rush the process. That's the biggest piece of advice I would tell them. They're always looking at social media. You know these kids nowadays. Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
just Johnny just signed for I don't know X amount of dollars and he's with Puma now and I need to sign tomorrow and I'll never make it. Nah, everybody has a different timeline, right? And rush the process. And if it entails going to college first, then you go to school, right? You're not going to be forgotten about going to college or university. You know what I mean? And if it's signing young, it has to be worth you doing so to go pro first, right?
Hmm.
And that's not just from a monetary value. There's other, areas that have to be very important and structurally make sense for you to do so. So that's the biggest piece of advice I'll give these kids nowadays, that they shouldn't rush their process and just keep developing and stay focused and on track. And the other piece of advice I would give these kids is that the mental aspect of the game is, for me, 85% of success. It is, right? We have a lot of talented players out there, but how many talented players do we see that never make it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the mental side of the game is very, very important, and they need to lock in when it comes to the mental.
Yeah, I think anytime I talk to, players that have, made it, it's one thing they harp on.
Hmm.
And I just think that your approach to the game and managing players is very welcomed. It's something that I see from your generation of players. They kind of have that mentality, man. So I really appreciate uh, everything that you're bringing to the game still today, and we just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for the game and for being on with us, man.
Nah, always. Tony, thanks for having me, and it's always been a pleasure, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, man.